Welcome GRD131, Graphic Design 1, and I've went over your logos, your first revisions of your logos, just your type-based logos, and hopefully you're revising them and making some changes so you can add some kind of graphical embellishments, I guess I could say, to them. And here's some examples to show you right here. Now these are just quick logos that I just threw together. I did not spend hours on these. I just threw together a bold typeface and a lighter typeface of a slab serif, and down here of a sans serif, just very simple stuff. And I just wanted to go over some things in Gravit on how to do some of these things. This is just with a line. This is just using a line, using the pen tool. This is using a couple basic shapes in Gravit. You know, same kind of thing that you could do in Illustrator, just joining them together so they make one complete shape. And down here, this is just putting two shapes together, just showing you basic ways to do things that you don't have to do a lot. You don't have to draw anything very complex. And this down here, I just wanted to point this out. This is actually a sans serif font that's been modified with the anchor points, and I'll show you how to do that too. So I just want to show you a couple ways to kind of adjust your logos to kind of just finish them off. That's what we're trying to do here. And again, the idea is have a strong type-based logo and then have some kind of maybe small accented graphical element to kind of just pull it all together. You want it all to work together, and that's what hopefully these things are doing a little bit. Again, they're not perfect. They're just examples. I could sit here all day and come up with ideas, and maybe some of them will be great and some of them will be okay. These are probably just okay. But I wanted to use these as an example, so I did mess around with this ahead of time. And a couple things just to point out in Gravit as you're working is once you put this together, if you group it, it becomes its own kind of layer element, which is really nice, and you can name it. And so that's logo 1, logo 2, logo 3. So everything that's built into those logos are in here. So it's a really nice way to organize, especially when you're doing a lot of different logos and ideas. You can kind of combine them all into one. So that's what I have here, these ideas, and I'll just show you a couple things, even right from the beginning, even just what I did to just come up with this logo. And I just did it real quick. I did it really just to show you these lines. So what I did was just say, okay, I want Alt, and I want it in a slab serif. So I went over here and I looked for Roboto, because I always like that one because there's a big family of fonts. So I went into Roboto, I went into Heavy, and then some of the things I'll do, I'll scroll down here and put on Auto Scale Font. Now, you don't have to do that right away. You can go here and just, if you hover over this area with the point size, just make it bigger. You could do that first, but then put Auto Scale on, because then you could kind of stretch it and, you know, squeeze it, scrunch it, you know. And when I mean that, I mean this is kind of scrunching it that way, and I'll undo. Command Z or Control Z. You could stretch it out that way, and I'll undo. And you could just scale it, just grabbing on a corner and doing that. So you could do all those things. Also, you can pull it together too, and sometimes I recommend doing this by going to the character spacing, which is the tracking, and just trying something like negative 0.03 at first, just to pull it tighter. Those things are almost touching. Maybe I'll go a little bit more. I'll try negative 0.05, so they're completely touching, but these aren't touching, so it's nice and big there. I'll zoom in a little bit so I have a better idea of what I'm doing, and then I'll just copy this. And the way I copy is I hold down my Option key on Mac or Alt key on Windows, and then I'll just highlight this and double click in here and just kind of highlight over it, and I'll put in Jeff because we wanted to have Jeff with this, and I'll make this smaller, and I'm not sure where I'm going to put Jeff yet. And I'll also put it in, you know, maybe a medium or something. Maybe I don't need it that bold. Maybe I want to keep it the same bold. Maybe I don't. But I'm just going to put it here. I don't know where I want it yet, but it's a secondary thing. So I don't need Jeff Alt real big. If you did make Jeff big, that's fine. You could have it all together, but I'm kind of accentuating the Alt. So I'll just do that for now. And I still need the roofing and exteriors. So I'll copy this again, and I'll double click in here and highlight this, or backspace, whatever you need to do. And I'm holding my Shift key, so I do it all in caps. I'm going to try it all in caps, and I'll use the ampersand. Exteriors, now it's not showing up right now because I need to put on auto and auto so it extends. And you can see when I did that, everything's a little too tight. I don't know if I even have a space there. Before I even check if there's a space, let me go in here, double click in my tracking and put that back to 0. And now I can see I don't have a space here, and I still have it on auto scale font. That's this check mark here. And hey, another thing I just want to point out, when you click on your page, make sure that this thing is white, this clip content, because if it's on, it hides everything off your page, which is nice for previewing. But since we're just kind of working on things, we like to see what's off our page. So I make sure I turn that off so it's white when it's off. Now, if I needed to see those over there, I can. Now here's my roofing exteriors. I might even make this lighter. It's in a medium font. I don't know if I'd have to go real light with it. I don't want to go too light because if it's getting small, you know, roofing exteriors, there's a lot of words there, a lot of characters, and I don't want to make it too small. I don't want to make it too light. That's getting very light. That's why something like that, I might keep it more in, you know, the medium or regular, you know, as long as it's smaller. And if they seem to get jumbled together, that would be a good time to track it out a little bit, just to kind of lighten it, get a little air in there if they're getting too jumbled together. The more bold you get, the more letters tend to jumble together. Now here they're bold, but I have them big, so it's okay if they're jumbled together. I want them jumbled together, but when they're smaller, you don't want them jumbled together because they get harder to read. So I might go here and just try like, I'll just highlight this and put 0.03. And I have to do auto again, and that might be a little bit better, and I could go smaller with this. Now when I was doing this, and I'll hit auto, I left it a little longer. I kind of like that for some reason. For one thing, it's getting too small. If I go down here, that's getting really tiny, and I don't necessarily want to do that. If you ever don't see that red thing, make sure you zoom in, and I'll just bring that out a little bit. But I kind of like the way it looked out here, like that. And it was kind of a setup to put something else here, so I kind of let that there. Now you might not have been thinking about that when you're working on your logos, but that's why you can keep revising. So I kind of did that, and it kind of set me up for something over here. And what I mentioned is you could put something simple as this, as just a line. You don't have to draw houses or anything like that, even though I will show you how to draw a house if you just put a line. And the easiest thing you could do is just go up here and take the pen tool, and this is like the Bezier pen tool. They have the Bezignon, but we'll just use the straight pen tool. And what it does is you just click and it makes a line segment. Now what you have to remember is at the end, make sure you double click on the point. Like if you start here and you want to make kind of like not a perfectly centered roof, but kind of an off-centered roof. Now let's see how I did that one. It doesn't even matter. I'll just kind of fill up the space. I'll just kind of go up here, I'll click, and then down here, this is where I want to double click. So I'm going to double click, and sometimes it doesn't work perfectly. If you still see the pen there, just go right on that point again and double click, and that should end it. You should be right on it. I'm having problems here. Okay, now that's okay. Now, if you did that, you might want to double check here. I'm going to go into my pointer and then go into your sub-select tool. That's what grabs anchor points. And I just want to make sure that I didn't make too many here. And let's see. Yeah, see, I ended up making a whole bunch. Look at all of them. So to get rid of them, I'll just hit delete. Now, that's not what should happen. It's just I didn't do a good job of double clicking. They just make it hard to kind of finish up there. Wow, I have a lot. It's like a deck of cards under here. There's tons of them. Okay, that's the last one, so hopefully you'll do better with that. So I'll click on this one and hit delete. So now I have my line. Now, I meant to show you how simple this is. Let me actually try something again. Let me try this again and see why that was a problem. I'll click, and then you should double click. And it's done. See, I think I kind of went off it a little bit, and that was the problem. So if I go in here, I should only have 1 point here. And there is. So I just didn't do it very well. And you could highlight these points, these connector points, and hit delete. That'll get rid of that. But here's your line here. And what you could do with this line is make it thicker and just go down to the border. It puts a border on automatically. And you can just kind of slide up. And, you know, how thick a border would you want? Well, you probably want it similar to what's going on, some of the thinner lines in here. You wouldn't want it any thicker than, you know, maybe this crossbar in this Jeff Alte part. And if it looks too angular, now this is kind of angular, but you might want to round it off a little. Another thing you could do, if you go in here into borders, into the settings, there's settings down here for borders. If you go in here, you could put a kind of a round end on it if you want. I don't think these round joins make a difference. A little bit. They round it off a little up there, but you could put round ends on them, and that kind of rounds off the ends a little bit. Let's see how that looks. See how it's kind of rounded now at the bottom? Looks a little cleaner like that. That's something you can or cannot do. I did it. I made it a little rounded on the end. You don't have to do that if you don't like it. Just go back and, I guess, put it back the way it was. Now, I did round off that one by using this at the join. Now, another thing to mention here, and this is very important, is actually when you're in here, make sure you click on Auto Scale Borders. What that means is when you make your logo smaller, if you scale it down, the thickness of this will scale down with it. You don't want to scale down a logo and have the thickness still the same size. So you want to make sure you do that. It's very important to do that, and in Illustrator as well. you'll have a stroke palette in Illustrator where you can do the same thing. So I just want to point out that. And looking what I did over here, I think I just added a little chimney, but I wanted kind of minimalistic. So I just did a little like angular kind of thing here. I just went over here and I wanted to kind of line it up with the top of the T there, and just went over like just one click, and then down here, this is where you want to double click. And if you keep your pen right and don't move at all, it should be fine. And just curious, I'll just kind of experiment here. If you copied this, if I went to edit, copy, or you could just do Command C or Control C, and then you clicked on this line and you did edit, paste, and they have paste style. What it should do, it should paste the same style as this line. Let's see if that works. And it worked. It even has the round thing there, and I might even make it a little thinner. But one thing you can even check, if you check the settings, you'll see it does have the auto scale border on, and I might want to make it a little bit thinner. So if I click on it, it's saying 9 right now. I'll go down a little bit lighter because it's kind of like a chimney kind of thing, and that looks okay. And notice how I have it lined up with elements that are in my logo. Now, you could say this is empty here. You might want to bring this in a little bit. Remember, if you need to bring in the anchor point, just go back here to the sub select tool, click on the edge, and grab that anchor point. Maybe you want to move it in a little bit. I don't know if that kind of looks too steep. Actually, I like it where it is. You just have to be careful about this empty area in here. And maybe this should go up. Maybe you want this up, and maybe you want it going in there. Something like that. Now, I'm not sure. I'm just playing around, and that's all I did. And I don't mind you playing around. You should be playing around a little bit with this. You should zoom back and take a look at it and see how it looks. I still think this one looks better. First, it looks a little off. Actually, it looked better the way it was. Maybe it just needs to come down. Again, the first time when I was just messing around, I didn't even think about it, and they kind of came out fine. But anyway, I'll move this down, and I'll kind of make it look a little more like the other one. It looked better in here, actually, because it looked more like a regular roof. And perhaps that the distance isn't so bad here. And I'll bring this thing in again. Remember, when you have to bring in the whole shape, just select it with the pointer, not the sub-select. And if you're trying to get in here and grab it, just use your arrow tool on your keyboard and just move it over a little. So I'm just going to let that like that right now. So that's using a stroke. If you need to shorten it, just go into your sub-select tool, grab the anchor point, move it up a little bit, and just do that. If you need to round it, that's in the settings of the stroke. So that's just one thing I wanted to show. And now for my second one, I'm going to copy this. I'll make a little house here. I'll just use this thing again. What did I do with this logo? I put Jeff somewhere else. So you could do that. I'm going to copy this. I'll go back to my pointer, and I'll just copy this. I'm just doing an option drag. On Windows, you would do an alt drag. And I'll drag Jeff down and make a copy. And, maybe we'll put Jeff somewhere else. Maybe that'll be in bold, maybe even heavy, maybe even the same as what we're using there. And maybe we'll find another spot for it. And I'll drag this down, and I'll kind of line that up at the end. And I'm not sure if I have any space in here. If I do auto, that should close it to the end. Now maybe I want to scrunch it a little bit, or maybe this one I want to make bigger. Maybe I want to make this one a little bigger, and then I have more room to put something in there. Now, I could certainly make alt bigger. I could even make this logo Jeff alt. But either way, what I wanted to point out here is whether you put Jeff here, or you find a little nook for Jeff, or if you just have Jeff in front, is fine. This might be a little place for a little house. And I saw people working with houses, and they were drawing them with pen tools and things like that. And I just wanted to point out that if you do want to draw a little house, just use your rectangle here. I'll just draw a rectangle. And don't worry about how big it is to start. Just make a rectangle, leave it gray for now, and then I'm going to make a triangle to put the roof on, and we're going to join these all together. So I'll show you some tools, and they do have a triangle tool, which is very nice. Illustrator does not have a triangle tool. You have to use a star tool and hold down an arrow to try to get the right sides. But I'm just going to draw a triangle. Now, it spins around, but if you hold your shift key while you do it, you can make a straight triangle. And you might say, well, that's too pointy. I don't want a big triangle like that. Then you could just grab this handle and kind of bend it down, and then kind of go in here and scale it down as you need. And if this is too big, I'll just squash this, because you want the roof to be somewhat prominent, not overpowering. But if you're kind of building a little house here, And that looks okay. It looks like a little house. Now it's off-centered. If you highlight both of these and just use this tool, this is the Align Center, that'll align those two shapes together. And if you're happy with that, we could probably join them all together. I'm going to add one more rectangle here and just put a little chimney and just do something like that, a little chimney on it, just to give it some scale, I guess. And you don't want it up real high or anything like that. I'll just kind of put it in the middle, and that looks okay. And now what you could do, if you want this to be one shape, you could unite it. If you go here and do the union, that joins it all together. But you want to make sure that everything's perfect. You don't want to kind of make it permanent. But what you can do is if you highlight these, it's different than grouping. It kind of makes everything overlapping, everything together. It's like getting lumps of clay and putting them together. They'll all become one. So if you click this will do the union, but if you can check this, and it'll look like that. However, if you hover over here, you'll see that it's not quite permanent. You'll still see the other shapes at times. And you can still break it apart if you need to. It's still considered a compound shape, and there's still a rectangle, polygon, and a rectangle. The polygon is the triangle in here. They're still in there, so you could still undo it, but you could leave it like this. If you want it permanent, you could highlight this shape and go to this squiggle thing, which converts to path, and then they would just be anchor points all around. You wouldn't have any more internal shapes. But I'll leave it like this for now as a compound shape. And you could highlight here and you can call it house if you want. That way you know it's a house. And I'm going to bring it over here. I scrolled too far. And I'll zoom out a little bit. And I've been telling people to kind of avoid putting words inside shapes because they can be a problem at small sizes. You want to keep it kind of more free and open as you can. And this makes a little nook here between the Jeff, between the letters. And also, I don't want it completely black. I don't want this thing, black to be really harsh. That's why I'm lightening it up. But I could even bring this over and fit it in this little nook here. That might be a little harsh. That's why I want to just lighten it up. And I'm just using one of these grays here. And there could be a color too. You could be using a color if you want, if you have some color scheme. That could eventually be a color, if you want to go with blue or brown or something. Nothing wrong with doing that. And I'm clicking on one of these at a time now. I'm going inside my house. So I'll just click on the whole house here. And then I could still color it. I could go in here and let's say I want it like a brownish color. I could go in here and just kind of find a nice beigey kind of color. And maybe that's a nice warm color to work with. And I'll nudge this up a little bit. Proximity purposes, I'll squash this a little bit because I think it would look better lined up at the end of the house, not the roof coming down, but like that. And that's a logo. And you could tweak it. Maybe Jeff could be a little bit smaller. Maybe Jeff doesn't have to be so tracked out. Maybe I'll just put it at 0 and just make it normal. That kind of is easier to read at smaller sizes. Remember, smaller fonts, when they get smaller, you don't want them tracked closer. When they get bigger, you can track them closer and even make them touch and it looks nice. But when they're smaller, if they're tracked too close, they get harder to read. So this is a little more open, a little more airy because the Jeff part is smaller. So here's another logo here, and we just used overlapping shapes. And remember, if you're completely set on the shape and you love it, you can go here to this convert to path and it'll make it one single shape, one single path. Plus it'll eliminate everything that's going on in here. See, it's just one path in your layer palette. So that's one thing you can do with these. And then another thing, even if you just did a little roof thing, now I don't really like this that much. I'm going to show you some things to do with anchor points. And even if you do a roof like that, you can just use rectangles and rotate them. And I'll show you how to do that. And I think what I'll do is I'll stop here, take a break, and then for part 2, I'll just finish up with this, because what I'm going to do with this is we're going to manipulate the anchor points. We're going to make that A come down. Have one leg of the A or one bar of the A coming down. We're going to join these things because they're not joining automatically. I actually did that. So I'll show you how to manipulate those anchor points to do that. And this will be using a sans serif font. So this is with slab serif. This is with Roboto. We had some ideas here. Certainly you could go in here and change this color if you want. Maybe it would look better with a gray roof. Who knows? You could put a chimney color on there if you wanted to, if you wanted to add more color and, just little ideas here. But again, the idea is keep them clean and simple. I'm trying to keep these simple as possible, and also so they look good at small sizes. I could zoom back quite a bit and I could still read it pretty good. You want to think about apps and things like that and how things will work at small sizes, and you want to keep them open. Actually, I like this one better because it's a little more united together. This is a little more open. With the Jeff out here and with that out there, it gets a little more extended. Not that it's a problem, but, if I had to choose, I'd probably choose this one here, even though the house thing is a little more cliche. But for part 2, I'm going to just show you how to work with anchor points, how to convert text to shapes and work with the anchor points, and just make some other simple little shapes here in part 2 as you keep revising your logo.